it's a very heavy video that we show the kids, but they really appreciate it and they stay locked into the presentation. Just now I tell my story. My name is Jack Swan, and this is my older brother Drew. We were born 16 months apart at Crittenton Hospital up in Rochester Hills. He was my best friend, and it was just me and him and our two parents growing up. April 3rd, 2013, we lost him to a synthetic opioid overdose. He was living down in Florida. Actually, he had been sober for about 2 years, recovering from a substance use disorder that he struggled with, and I'll share more about. When I got the call that he had passed, his friends found him about 24 hours after he had passed, and then I had to call both my parents in the middle of the night and let them know that they had lost their firstborn son. It is an experience that, wrecked my family. It wrecked the next decade of my life, and didn't think that I would really come back from, and my parents as well. But we share our story in presentations. I gave this same presentation down in Florida with my mom last week 11 times. I gave the presentation with my dad, who's here recording, a ton of times. And actually, Fentanyl Fathers started with just a group of bereaved parents who all sat on a Zoom call 2 years ago. And since then, we've done over 300 presentations like this, reaching over 100,000 students. So it just shows the impact that our bereavement and our grief can have when we do decide to share our stories and try and make a change. Drew was very smart. He was very good looking. It was not fair being his brother because there was no competing with him, at least in the looks department and the popularity department. He really just knew how to light up a room, and he shaped so much of the person that I am because he was all of those things. I got to kind of sit in the background, not take over the spotlight, but I just knew that I was protected and that I had like the coolest brother and best friend all growing up. So to lose him, I had to kind of figure out who I was. You figure out your new identity, losing your brother when you're 23 years old, and then how am I going to go on and make an impact on the world, all those plans. You grieve more than the person. You grieve the weddings, the nieces, the nephews, the family reunions, the time with friends together. It splits up a lot more than just losing that person. It loses those future memories and times is another kind of part of the mourning that goes on. And I felt very alone in that for a long time, but since starting this organization, I've connected with other bereaved siblings, other bereaved family members, and it turns out a lot of people are going through exactly what I'm going through. So that's been a real great way of healing is just by giving back to also the bereaved families that we come into contact with. But back to Drew. So he was very smart. I remember in high school, he wasn't studying for his ACT. I was studying for my ACT. And I'll keep my testimony on a little bit longer because we have more time today. But I took an ACT course twice leading up to my ACT, and I think I scored a 27. And Drew didn't study, and he scored, I think, a 33 in his ACT. Waking up hungover, and took it in the morning. In high school, he did experiment with alcohol and marijuana, were two things that he and his friends experimented with very young. I think that we grew up in Wisconsin. After we were born in Rochester, we moved to Wisconsin when I was about 18 months old. But kids were experimenting a lot with prescription pills, with alcohol, with marijuana. Today, I think less kids are actually using substances, which also needs to be more of a normalized belief in adolescence. Is not all of them are using it like they were 10 years ago. We actually have seen a drip down effect, but the problem is that the adulterated drug market that they're now subject to, which is just slaughtering youth. Drew experimented with substances, but he never had a real true addiction. He excelled in sports. He excelled academically. He was MVP of his tennis team. He was a state champion swimmer in the 100-meter breaststroke. He was voted best looking in his class. He had a very healthy relationship with his girlfriend that he maintained through college, Allie. And then when he got into college, he had an injury. He broke his collarbone. He went to an emergency department and he got his first prescription for something called Percocet, which many people in this country are prescribed after surgery or after breaking a bone. And it is effective at, pain relief, but it's also very, very addictive. Something we know more now, but at the time when Drew was first prescribed that, my parents, even me, hearing about him being put on medication for a fracture, we thought, this is like an ibuprofen or Tylenol or just something that he needs. Fast forward 2 years, we find out that he has a full-blown substance use disorder. And my mom finally confronts him at his friend's apartment saying, Drew, what's going on? She noticed a few pills missing from her husband's medicine cabinet that he had been prescribed after his surgery. And Drew, this big, very confident young man break down in tears saying, I can't get off of these I can't get off of these drugs. And his friends saying, we've tried, we've watched him go through the withdrawal. I actually had the painful experience of watching him try and get off these substances, cold turkey as well. And he just couldn't. So we got him into, he finally asked for help, but he struggled for 2 years before he could ask for help, because this wasn't something that was really talked about openly as well. So another important reason we do this presentations in school and talk so openly about our experiences is because it allows others to talk about their experiences too. And we know that stigma is really something that holds people back from getting the help that they might otherwise need. So even just having a conversation about this with your students or with people, as everybody here knows, social workers, you can help save lives, truly. So Drew finally, we got him into an outpatient treatment center. He started a Suboxone treatment center. That didn't really work out for him. He kept relapsing and was really struggling until we got him into an inpatient rehab in neighboring Illinois. Drew was in Wisconsin at the time. I was in Michigan. I was actually finishing up my undergrad at Ferris State University, and then I was going on to a graduate program at MSU the following year when Drew was getting help. So he went to Rosencrantz in Illinois. He did a 30-day treatment there, and then he said, I want to continue my sobriety, and I want to go to a recovery center, or a halfway house, and what better place than sunny Florida? So he did this whole sales pitch for me and my parents as we went and visited him in his rehab center, and he said, this nice sunny Florida in Hollywood, Florida, is where I want to get sober and start my life of sobriety. And we're like, that's great. We'll get him away from the bad influences in Milwaukee, the drug dealers that he knew, and put him somewhere else. But unfortunately, these substances, they exist everywhere. So it really, recovery is built on more, foundation of really putting in the work, which he did for the next several years. He changed his friend group. He said that he always was jealous of my way of being able to attract good friend groups. A lot of my friends were going in the medical path. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're whatever. And he wanted to surround himself more with that, but he felt like he was a magnet for more toxic people at the time. So when he moved to Florida, he started volunteering at his church. He got 2 jobs as a visual manager of a Hollister. He worked 2 restaurant jobs as a server, and he was happy. He was working out every day. He would get up at 5 a.m. He would go to the gym. He would meet his friends Vincente and whoever his twin brother is, and they would work out, and Drew would come home at 9 o'clock at night, taking the bus between jobs, and he would just talk about how happy he was. He wrote a blog. He left us with so many memories, and just his thoughts as a young 20-something are amazing even today. You know, I'm 36. He'll always be my older brother, and whatever he did, you know, will still be scripture for our family. But he was just so well thought out and well spoken, and seemed to just, you know, there are certain people who just know that their time is limited, and they just go, and live life like so purposefully. So he was kind of like that. But one day he gave me a call and said that he had relapsed. He had a friend, Lexi Ann Holtz, come down to visit him from Wisconsin, and they went to a rave in Miami. They did Molly, ecstasy, down at the rave, and Drew said that kind of put him out, and then normalized a life of kind of drinking. He didn't feel like he struggled with alcohol, and at the time I didn't know anything about addiction. I didn't know that one substance meant that you would eventually kind of find your way to the substance you really wanted. So I was just happy as long as it was anything that was not opioid related that he was, you know, using at the time. But he went to a couple of birthday parties. He said that he had drank in some alcohol, but now he was getting back on the straight and narrow. And then about 2 weeks later, he had died. My last conversation with him, he actually said, "Jack, I need to see you. I'm struggling, and I was in the middle of my finals, my first year up at MSU Com." And I said, like, "I can see you after finals. You can come up to Michigan and live with me." He said, "No, I need to see you sooner." And 24 hours after that phone conversation, he had passed. It's something that will just haunt me. Like, what could I have said? What could I have done? But it was, unfortunately, you know, there was nothing that I could do. That day, I later found out that he was with his friend Rico. They went to work out, and Drew was showing signs of being kind of sluggish. He was dragging his feet. He was slurring his speech. He wasn't showing up necessarily in the world like he normally does. And Rico noticed these things, but he thought that, you know, Drew may be on something. He didn't really know. He didn't want to have the conversation with Drew or really bring it up. So he said, "Let's switch from the gym. Let's go do some apartment shopping. I need to find a new place to live." So Drew went over to Rico's house. They started looking at some apartments online on Zillow. And then Drew kept on stepping away, and he was smoking cigarettes outside. And Drew wasn't really a cigarette smoker, but it seemed like he was trying to keep himself awake. And Rico thought that was odd, but again, thought Drew might just need to like go home and sleep something off. So he drove Drew back to his sober living home, which Drew was living in sober living. Sober living houses aren't supposed to have controlled substances. They're not supposed to have, you know, drug use going on in the home. It's actually where Drew found the prescription, or the synthetic opioid that ended up killing him, was being housed in a prescription bottle that his roommate had in their medicine cabinet at home. We later found out, but he was dropped off by Rico that night. Rico said, "Swan, are you sure you're okay?" And Drew walked into his sober living home, and he just gave Rico the thumbs up as he was walking in, that he was okay. And Drew was not okay. He made it about 2 steps inside before he fell over on his face. He chipped his tooth. There was blood on the floor, and then he stumbled into his room a couple of feet away, fell into his bed, and never woke up. He died from a synthetic opioid overdose, and just by taking a medication that was not prescribed to him, that was in his roommate's medicine cabinet that night. Drew's story is not unique. I've told it so many times. I've connected with other people whose story is very similar to my own. And with the emergence of fentanyl, now it's just becoming more and more common in younger and younger people. But he died a week before his 25th birthday, in the month of April. So he died on April 3rd. His birthday's April 10th. We buried him on April 13th. So the month of April for us is shot. It's a tough month, I think, for our whole family. But we bring awareness to Drew's passing, just not to share our stories as like, this is a terrible, sad thing that happened to my family, but also to empower young people to make healthy decisions for their own life, but then also know how to respond in case they do see the signs of an opioid overdose. There are things that we can learn from Drew's story, like how he came into contact with a synthetic opioid by taking a prescription that wasn't his, by teaching students about naloxone, which, how many of you have heard of naloxone? Some of you? Narcan? So Narcan's just the brand name version of naloxone, but they both reverse the effects of an opioid overdose, like Drew was experiencing. So we want students to know about naloxone and how it's used to potentially save lives. And also just know how to recognize those signs of an overdose so that they can potentially save a life. Next, I'll turn it over to Mike. He's going to introduce you to young